Okay, jumping on here today, not to talk about role playing games, but to talk again about weird ass comics, weird comic books. Uh, Not sure exactly why I feel compelled to do this, except maybe to solidify my place as the biggest geek, science fiction, horror, fantasy, and role playing geek in the entire world. Spicy Tales I got in a collection of 50 comics, rare comics, and as you can see, unfortunately, there's a little bit of damage, a little bit of wear on the side, so it's not a mint condition exactly, but it is curious enough to uh, look at here, to examine. The artist, writer is Robert Leslie Bellum, who it says here, let us now praise Robert Leslie Bellum and his most famous creation, Dan Turner, Hollywood Detective, who checks into our pages this month with a bit of wartime agitprop called Zoot Suit Killers. Bellum was born in Philadelphia in 1902, so he is long gone. These comics are reprints of naughty, hence Spicy Tales, a naughty anthology. These reprints are from the 80s from Eternity Comics, and they are the old 40s, as it says, agitprop, anti-Japanese, considering that there's anti-Japanese stuff, although these look as if they're before Pearl Harbor. Hawaiian Spy Hunt. It's the kind of artwork you would more or less expect from the era, the kind of cutie cheesecake pinup burlesque type artwork. First story is about a spy ring at Pearl Harbor, and that one was 1941, so that it actually was, I believe, predates Pearl Harbor, which perhaps. Anyway, Spy Ring, directed by our mastermind up in the hills. This features a little bit of nudity here, covered conveniently by a lei. She is captured by a spy boss. This guy here, a Japanese spy boss, and then Sally Sleuth's partner, who he imprisons, creates a kind of a snare for a conveniently stupid, depicted as stupid native, to snare his foot in so he can get away and free Sally the sleuth, who is tormented, tortured, and abused while being topless. Dan Turner, Hollywood Detective. We have Zoot Suit Rioters, the famous Zoot Suit Rioters from the 40s that the military was sent in to purge in a very iron-fisted manner. The Zoot Suit Rioters are killing an Asian woman here and a Chinese woman outside of a movie studio. And so Dan Turner, Hollywood Detective, goes into the studio and talks to her brother, who doesn't know that the killing just occurred. At the end of it, we find out that this really arrogant Japanese woman, Dan Turner discovers a Shinto shrine, which means you've got Jap blood. So what, Hank Shaw? I see it all now. Nip secret agent for a mob of Jap saboteurs. Really? Working for Superior Picks, you had access to zoot suit costumes for your gang. Do tell. Wearing dark makeup, your Japs impersonated Mexican zoot suiters and started riots. You're so smart. Anyway, she's very arrogant and very cocky. And up until the time that the Chinese woman who was killed by the fake zoot suiters, who were actually Japanese, grabs a Browning water-cooled submachine gun and then slaughters everybody. But he's okay in the end. Scimitar was apparently a comic title from Eternity, a modern comic title, obviously, of a woman licking blood off of a blade. This next story, Polly of the Plains. Now, this is interesting because we have nudity, we have torture, we have, let's just see, lured into Pancho's camp by a scrap of silk with Polly's initial on it. Jean, in her search for Polly, is tortured by Pancho, who has an eye for ransom. Bah, she tell me nothing. Then you're not really a bandit? This was the only guys I could take to join Pancho's gang, says the hero. The hero's a veterinarian, tells Polly that he is really a G-man put on Pancho's trail. Poor Jean is not having a good time of it. She's covered in blood and about half naked here. Tie the blonde witch in the sun for the water cure. Okay, so now she's got her breast exposed. She's got blood spots or torture spots on her. Under the merciless heat of the noonday sun, Pancho's water cure. And she's tortured by having water tied just out of her reach. So, by the way, Polly, do you happen to know a young blonde girl that stumbled into Pancho's clutches a few days ago? Asked the veterinarian G-Man. Why, that must be Jean. Ooh, poor kid, what are they doing to her? We must do something. Oh, Ken, his name is Ken. You must get this over to Jean. Yes, but how? Polly scribbles a note and wraps it around a knife. Assuming a belligerent attitude, Ken approaches Jean. Say, I'm a friend. Pretend that you're frightened. He's dressed like a cowboy from the movies. Go ahead and kill me and get it over with, you big brute. Ken then drops the knife and pretends to kick Jean. Oh, Jean does not have a good time of it in this comic book. No time now to explain. Good luck. But who are you? Jean uses the knife to cut her bonds. While Ken and Polly plot a way for Polly to escape, Ken is called to Pancho's den for an unexpected conference. I will test you tonight. You will take the useless blonde wench and kill her. I want you to bring back the ear for proof. Bring back her ear for proof. Or else. What can Ken do now? Does Jean get away? See the April issue of Spicy Western Stories. Okay, that gives you an example of a weird-ass comic, Spicy Tales. An anthology, really. I wish it was in better condition, but an anthology of weird-ass tales. There's a little cheesecake cutie from the 30s or 40s. From magazines such as Spicy Detective, April 1941. 1943, Spicy Detective. Spicy Adventure. Apparently a lot of things were spicy. That's from February of 35. Betty Blake, Super Detective, November 1934. From Super Detective, November 34. Ultimatum, Polly of the Plains. Spicy Western, March 1937. Now, we didn't get to the last Sally the Sleuth stories. Didn't really... well... I suppose we could go get into it a bit more, but I think we'll wrap it up there, really. That's a little interesting. In the back, there's another modern comic from Eternity, Ninja High School. It looks to be a manga. This reprint came out in... let's see, where's it at? Came out November of 88, distributed by Eternity Comics, division of Malibu Graphics. Good, interesting comic to have. I wish it were in better condition, but it just isn't. Perhaps somebody will want it anyway. There's more. Crime Classics. Classic Shadow comic strip by Maxwell Grant and Vernon Green from the 40s. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? Robotech 2, The Sentinels, more manga. Oh my. Gun Fury, written and illustrated by very nice artwork. Very interesting artwork. A dinosaur to keep you warm. Dinosaurs for Hire. I've not heard of any of these comics. I believe I've heard of Gun Fury. I believe no, actually, that would be Dan Fury. Let's go ahead, though. Let's go ahead and read about Bellum. Let us now praise Robert Leslie Bellum and his most famous creation, Dan Turner, Hollywood detective, who checks into our pages this month with a bit of wartime agitprop called Zoot Suit Killers, illustrated by his partner in crime, Adolphe Barreau. Bellum, born in Philadelphia in 1902, began his writing career in the newspapers, starting in the city of his birth and zigzagging his way westward, with stops in Washington, Atlantic City, Memphis, Miami, Tulsa. And it's continued back here. Fresno, and finally Pasadena, where he settled in 1928. In 1925, while still working as a newspaper writer, he began selling stories to pulp magazines. By 1934, when he signed on with Frank Armour's pulp outfit, he was cranking out dozens of stories a year. Dan Turner is only one of Bellum's creations. Under the pseudonym of Jerome Severs Perry, he also came up with another Hollywood detective named Little Jack Horner, who appeared in Armour's Speed Detective and Hollywood Detective right alongside Dan's tales. As a matter of fact, he often wrote whole issues of Hollywood Detective under a variety of pseudonyms. With W.T. Ballard, another prolific pulp writer, Bellum wrote a couple of series. Jim Anthony, Super Detective, for Armour's Super Detective book, and Outside the Armour Stable, the Chinese detective Dr. Zheng for Popular Detective. Bellum did a stuntman detective named Nick Ransom for Red Star Detective, and later for Thrilling Detective and The Phantom Detective, with Nick dropping the stunt work to become a regular Hollywood P.I. But by far Bellum's best-known character was the slick, wisecracking Dan Turner, who lived from 34 to 50 in the pages of the pulps, and for a couple of years after that in the Crime Smashers comic book, which reprinted the 8-page comic stories from the pulps in full color. There were more Dan Turner novelettes and short stories than anything else, of course, with well over 300 of them published in Hollywood Detective, Speed Detective, and occasionally in other Frank Armour pulps. Although it's hard to determine how many Dan Turner comic stories ran in these pulps, it's safe to guess that there were at least somewhere between 50 and 100. And there was also a Dan Turner movie, although it's not seen much these days. I'll have to check that one out. Blackmail, not the Alfred Hitchcock film of 29, nor the high-budget Edward G. Robinson star of a decade later, both of which have the same title. It was cranked out by Republic Studios, the famous serial people, in 1947, and featured William Marshall as Dan and Grant Withers as Inspector Donaldson, with B-picture queen Adele Mara as the female lead and former silent screen star Ricardo Cortez as a playboy named Ziggy Cranston, who gets involved with shakedown artists. Although Bellum would go on to script dozens of TV shows after the pulps went under, he was not the scripter of this one. Instead, Republic stalwart Royal B. Cole handled that chore, adapting Bellum's story Stock Shot from the July 1944 Speed Detective. It was a minor effort even for Republic, and reviews were not particularly favorable. However, a New York Times notice of August 5, 1947, indicates that at least Cole tried to preserve some of Bellum's snappy dialogue, which was always Dan's strong point. Bellum died in 1968, a successful television scriptwriter. During the heyday of the pulps, it was not uncommon for him to turn out 1 million words a year, and Dan Turner's stories were highly visible in their time. Zoot Suit Killers, featured here this month, was later rewritten and redrawn for an issue of Crime Mysteries Comics, with the Zoot Suiters transmogrified into hillbillies. Really. Other Hotcha tales in this issue include a quadruple helping of Sally the Sleuth, Hawaiian Spy Hunt from the April 1941 Spicy Detective, a story about spies at Pearl Harbor published only 8 months before the Japanese attack. Now, okay, There is an example of life imitating art, and also an example of what some people might say is a conspiracy or the lesser magic. I've heard people talk about how episodes of The Simpsons, things from different things I've seen in comics that seem to predate national headlines, national disasters, and things. People wearing masks before the pandemic ever hit, and things like that in comic books. So, 8 months before the Japanese attack, and 3 2-pagers from Spicy Detective pre-censorship days in the mid 1930s. As noted in earlier issues, the Spicy line bowed to pressure and cleaned itself up in the early 40s. Much like the horror comics EC Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror would do a decade or more later. The continuing sagas of Polly of the Plains from Spicy Western Stories and Diana Daw, Spicy Adventure Stories, complete the package. Should be noted that there are both racial and sexual stereotypes. No shucks. No shit. Racial and sexual stereotypes here that will be offensive to some, as well as a bit of perversity that may make a few people squirmy. Please keep in mind that these stories are products of their time, carried in magazines that were disreputable to start with, and should be viewed in that context. As always, we welcome your letters, especially those that shed light on some of the unsung creators of these comics. Our address is Spicy Tales, care of Eternity Comics, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we're at 16 minutes, and this is going to take, there's just another look at the astonishing front cover there of Spicy Tales, wonderful old pulp art. We're at 17 minutes. It's going to take 140 years for this to upload because my internet is from 1845. That's all for this morning. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.